My name is Diego Popescu. I'm 28 years old, and I live alone in a modest apartment on the north side of Chicago. I work as a freelance cybersecurity consultant, helping companies recover hacked systems, trace digital fraud, and investigate suspicious online activity. My schedule changes every week. Some months are packed with clients. Other months are quiet enough that I spend entire afternoons updating old projects or drinking coffee while reading security reports. I've always relied on sarcasm more than charm. It's how I deal with awkward situations. Most of the time, people laugh. Sometimes they don't. Looking back now, one joke changed the direction of my life more than any serious decision I had ever made. The other important person in this story is Ryan Keller. Ryan and I met during our first year of college, almost 10 years ago. We weren't identical, but somehow we became close friends. He was calm, organized, and always seemed to know exactly what to say in every situation. After graduation, he built a technology startup that appeared to grow faster every year. Whenever people mentioned his name, they talked about business success, charity events, and leadership. Nobody questioned his reputation. At least nobody that I knew. The third person is Evelyn Keller, Ryan's mother. I had heard stories about her for years, but had never met her in person until recently. She was 51, confident without trying to impress anyone, and surprisingly easy to talk to. She carried herself with quiet composure that made conversations feel natural. She wasn't the type of person who dominated a room, yet people paid attention whenever she spoke. At the time, I believed meeting Evelyn would simply be another pleasant evening with an old friend. I couldn't have been more wrong. 3 weeks before everything collapsed, Ryan called me unexpectedly on a Thursday afternoon. "Long time no see," he said. We talked for nearly 20 minutes, catching up on work, old classmates, and life in general. Before ending the call, he invited me to have dinner at his family home that Saturday evening. I accepted without thinking much about it. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. The weather was unusually warm for early spring. The drive from my apartment to Ryan's neighborhood took just under 40 minutes. His parents lived in one of the wealthier parts of the city, where tree-lined streets, large brick houses, and perfectly maintained gardens made everything look peaceful. Ryan greeted me at the front door with the same confident smile I remembered from college. Inside, everything felt polished without looking extravagant. Family photographs lined the hallway. Shelves displayed awards from Ryan's company. The dining room overlooked a spacious backyard where the evening sunlight reflected off a small pond behind the house. It looked like the home of a successful family. Nothing about it suggested secrets. Dinner began normally. We talked about work, travel, mutual friends, and how quickly the years had passed. Ryan joked about my habit of accepting difficult cybersecurity cases that nobody else wanted. I responded by teasing him about becoming one of those startup founders who suddenly wore expensive watches and talked about productivity every 5 minutes. Everyone laughed. The atmosphere stayed relaxed. Then Evelyn entered carrying dessert. That was the first time I had seen her. She smiled politely before taking her seat. Our conversation shifted naturally. She asked about my work, my family, and whether I had ever considered settling down instead of moving from project to project. Ryan interrupted with a grin. "So, Diego's still single?" I rolled my eyes. "Unfortunately." He laughed even harder. "You've always had terrible taste in dating." Without giving myself even 1 second to think, I answered with the kind of sarcastic comment that usually disappeared into harmless laughter. "I don't know, man. Your mom's hotter than most girls I've dated." Silence. Complete silence. I realized what I had just said before anyone else reacted. I opened my mouth to apologize. Then Evelyn smiled. "So." She looked directly at me. "Want to go out with me?" The room exploded with laughter. I laughed too, mostly because I had no idea what else to do. It felt like one of those awkward moments that everyone would forget by the next morning. Except one person wasn't laughing anymore. Ryan. His smile disappeared for only a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did. His eyes shifted toward his mother before returning to me. The expression vanished almost instantly, replaced by another friendly smile as if nothing had happened. Dinner continued. Conversations resumed. Plates were cleared from the table. The evening ended peacefully. When I left the house about an hour later, Ryan thanked me for coming and said we shouldn't wait so long before meeting again. Everything sounded normal. Everything looked normal. As I drove home through the quiet streets of Chicago that night, I kept replaying that strange moment in my head. Not because of my stupid joke, not because of Evelyn's unexpected answer, but because of the brief expression on Ryan's face. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't annoyance. It looked like fear. At the time, I convinced myself I was imagining things. A week later, I learned I wasn't. A week passed without anything unusual happening. I buried myself in client work, spending long hours helping a manufacturing company recover from a ransomware attack. My apartment slowly disappeared beneath stacks of printed reports, empty coffee cups, and tangled charging cables. By Wednesday evening, I had almost forgotten the awkward dinner at Ryan's house. Almost. At exactly 9:17 the next morning, my phone vibrated. The message came from an unknown number. "Good morning, Diego. It's Evelyn. I hope I'm not interrupting your work." For a second, I wondered if someone was playing a prank. Then another message arrived. I wanted to apologize if my joke at dinner made things uncomfortable. "Would you be willing to meet for coffee tomorrow afternoon?" I stared at the screen longer than I should have. There was nothing inappropriate about the invitation. Still, something about it felt unexpected. After thinking for several minutes, I replied, "Sure, coffee sounds good." She suggested a quiet cafe near the Chicago River, not far from the financial district. Friday afternoon arrived. The cafe was smaller than I expected, tucked between two office buildings with large glass windows facing the street. Inside, soft music played while people worked on laptops or chatted over late lunches. Evelyn was already there. She waved when I walked in. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I was curious." She smiled. I figured. The first 15 minutes felt perfectly ordinary. We talked about books, travel, Chicago traffic, and how freelance work compared to running a company. She asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully instead of waiting for her turn to speak. Eventually she laughed. "I should probably apologize again for that joke." I shook my head. "If anything, I should be apologizing. You certainly caught everyone off guard. I've had that effect before." We both laughed. The awkwardness from dinner seemed to disappear. Then the conversation changed. "So," she asked casually, "how often do companies hire you to investigate fraud?" The question caught me off guard. "It depends. What kind of fraud?" "Financial fraud, identity theft, internal security breaches, cases where digital records don't match reality." She stirred her coffee without looking at me. "Can electronic accounting records be manipulated without leaving obvious traces?" "They can." "And how difficult is it to uncover something like that?" "It depends on who's hiding it." She nodded slowly. No reaction. No follow-up. Instead, she asked about my favorite restaurants. The shift was so sudden that I almost forgot the previous questions. Almost. When we finished our coffee, we walked outside together. The afternoon air was cool, and office workers hurried past us toward nearby train stations. Evelyn checked her watch. "I have another appointment." "No problem." It was nice finally talking without everyone else around. "You too." We shook hands. She walked toward the parking garage. I headed in the opposite direction. I had barely reached the corner before I heard someone calling my name. "Diego." I turned around. Evelyn was jogging toward me carrying nothing. "My notebook." She looked around. "I think I left it at the cafe." We hurried back together. The table where we had been sitting was already empty. The server handed me a dark brown leather notebook. "You left this." I offered it to Evelyn. Instead of taking it, she smiled politely. "You keep it." I frowned. "Are you sure?" I already copied what I needed. I blinked. "What does that mean?" "You'll understand later." Before I could ask another question, she thanked me again, stepped outside, and disappeared into the crowd before I even reached the front door. I stood there holding a notebook that didn't belong to me. The entire situation suddenly felt strange. When I returned home that evening, curiosity finally won. I placed the notebook on my desk and opened the first page. There were no names, no introductions, only handwritten dates, warehouse addresses, company registration numbers, shipping schedules. Several pages contained lists of businesses connected by arrows and notes written in blue ink. One company name immediately caught my attention: Keller Dynamics, Ryan Startup. I flipped through more pages. The same company appeared repeatedly, sometimes beside warehouse locations, sometimes beside financial figures, sometimes beside question marks. None of it made sense. It looked less like business planning and more like someone trying to connect pieces of a puzzle. Then I noticed something else. Several pages had been carefully removed. Not torn, cut cleanly with a blade. Whoever removed them had done it deliberately. Before I could examine the notebook further, someone rang my apartment doorbell. Once, twice, 3 times. The knocking became louder. I looked through the peephole. Ryan stood outside my apartment. His expression wasn't friendly. It wasn't relaxed. He looked impatient. The moment I opened the door, his eyes dropped to the notebook lying on my desk behind me. "There it is," he said quietly. "I need that notebook." He didn't ask. He expected me to hand it over immediately. For the first time since we became friends nearly 10 years earlier, Ryan sounded less like an old friend and more like someone trying to recover evidence before I discovered what it really meant. Ryan didn't step inside my apartment. He stood in the hallway with one hand in his jacket pocket, staring past me at the notebook on my desk. "I've been looking everywhere for it," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. I folded my arms. "Funny. Evelyn told me to keep it." His jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. "She didn't know what she was doing." "Really?" "She's been under a lot of stress lately." I had known Ryan for almost a decade. Whenever he lied, he spoke a little slower than usual. He was doing it now. I picked up the notebook. "So, what's inside that's so important?" He didn't answer immediately. "Private family matters." "Private family matters with warehouse addresses and company registration numbers?" His eyes narrowed. "You already looked." I opened the first few pages. Ryan sighed as if I had become the unreasonable one. "Diego, just get back." "No." The word came out before I had time to reconsider. The hallway became silent. Neither of us moved. Finally, Ryan forced a smile. "I don't want this turning into an argument." "Then explain what's going on." "I can't." "Or you won't." Another long pause. Eventually he nodded once. "Keep it tonight." His answer surprised me. "I'll come back tomorrow." Without another word, he turned around and walked toward the elevator. The doors closed behind him. I locked my apartment immediately. Something was very wrong. That night, I barely slept. Around 2 in the morning, my desktop computer powered itself on. The monitor lit up. At first, I thought Windows had installed another automatic update. Then files started disappearing. Folders closed by themselves. Command Windows flashed across the screen faster than I could read them. Someone had gained remote access. Adrenaline hit instantly. I yanked the Ethernet cable from the computer and shut off the router. The attack stopped. For several seconds, I simply stared at the dark monitor. Whoever had connected wasn't trying to steal money. They were deleting data. Fortunately, I kept offline backups of every client project. Nothing important was lost. But one thing became obvious. This wasn't random. Whoever targeted my system knew exactly where to look. The next morning, I examined the notebook again. One warehouse address appeared more often than the others. It was located in an industrial district nearly 40 minutes from downtown. Curiosity defeated common sense. I drove there after lunch. The neighborhood looked abandoned. Old brick factories lined both sides of the road. Several buildings had broken windows and faded company signs that hadn't been replaced in years. The warehouse listed in the notebook had no visible logo. Its parking lot was almost empty. From the outside, it looked inactive. Then I noticed something strange. A delivery truck entered through the rear gate. 10 minutes later, another truck arrived. Neither vehicle displayed company branding. Workers unloaded sealed containers quickly before closing the loading doors again. Everything happened with practiced efficiency. I parked across the street behind an abandoned repair shop and watched through the windshield. More trucks arrived. None stayed longer than 15 minutes. No paperwork changed hands. No conversations lasted more than a few seconds. It didn't resemble a normal business operation. I pulled out my phone and began recording. As the afternoon turned into evening, a black luxury SUV entered the property. The driver stepped out. Even from a distance, I recognized him immediately. Ryan. He wasn't wearing the casual clothes I'd seen the previous night. He wore a dark suit and spoke confidently with several men gathered near the loading dock. One of them handed him a clipboard. Ryan checked something, signed a document, and pointed toward another shipment waiting beside the warehouse. This wasn't a quick visit. He was clearly in charge. I zoomed in with my phone's camera. Several large crates were loaded into another truck. Each crate carried labels identifying them as computer networking equipment. But one worker accidentally dropped a corner of the protective cover. Inside wasn't networking hardware. It looked like tightly stacked boxes wrapped in identical packaging without manufacturer markings. The labels outside didn't match the contents inside. A customs fraud scheme? Illegal imports? Smuggling? I couldn't tell. But I knew enough to realize Ryan's technology company wasn't operating the way everyone believed. His successful startup appeared to be hiding something much larger. My heartbeat quickened. I decided I had seen enough. I placed the phone on the passenger seat, started my car, and slowly pulled away from the curb. I had driven less than 2 blocks when headlights appeared behind me. A black SUV, the same model that had entered the warehouse. It stayed exactly 2 car lengths behind me. Every turn I made, it made 2. I told myself it was probably coincidence. Then I made 3 unnecessary turns through empty industrial streets. The SUV copied every one of them. Coincidence disappeared. Someone from the warehouse had noticed me. Someone was following me. I reached for my phone to call the police. Before I could unlock the screen, another vehicle suddenly turned onto the road ahead and blocked the intersection. I slammed on the brakes. The SUV behind me stopped as well. For one terrifying moment, I believed I had driven straight into a trap. My pulse pounded so hard that I could hear it over the engine. The SUV behind me idled only a few yards from my rear bumper. The sedan blocking the intersection didn't move. For several long seconds, nobody stepped out. I reached into the center console, where I kept a small flashlight, gripping it more out of instinct than confidence. Then the driver's door of the sedan opened. A woman stepped out. It was Evelyn. She walked straight toward my car without looking at the SUV behind me. When she reached my window, she knocked twice. Unlocked the door. I lowered the window only a few inches. What is this? No time. She glanced over her shoulder. They're waiting for you to panic. I still didn't trust her. Who are they? Ryan's people. That answer made my stomach tighten. She opened the passenger door herself before I could stop her and climbed inside. Drive. The road is blocked. Reverse. I looked in the mirror. The SUV behind me hadn't expected that. I shifted into reverse, backed into a narrow side street, and accelerated before the driver behind us reacted. The SUV immediately turned after us. They're still following, I said. I know. You seem strangely calm. I've been expecting this day. She directed me through a maze of old industrial roads before leading me toward older neighborhoods on the west side of Chicago. After nearly 20 minutes of sharp turns and changing routes, the SUV finally disappeared. Only then did Evelyn let out a slow breath. Pull over. I parked beside a small public library that looked as though it had been standing there for decades. The building was quiet, almost empty. Inside, only a librarian and 2 elderly visitors sat reading newspapers. Evelyn chose a table in the back corner. No cameras, no crowds, no chance of being overheard. For the first time since leaving the warehouse, she looked directly at me. I'm sorry. For what? For involving you. I crossed my arms. You'd better start explaining. She nodded. The notebook wasn't an accident. I figured. I wanted you to have it. I leaned back in my chair. So this entire coffee meeting was planned. I wasn't even surprised anymore. What exactly is Ryan hiding? She hesitated before answering. The company everyone admires isn't the company he actually runs. I saw enough yesterday to know that. She looked down at her hands. When my husband died 6 years ago, Ryan inherited most of the family business. I thought he built Keller Dynamics from scratch. That's the story everyone believes. So it isn't true. He rebuilt the company. Her voice became quieter, and then he changed what it did. She explained that the original business had manufactured industrial communication equipment for transportation companies. It was profitable. It was legitimate. After taking control, Ryan gradually shut down several divisions while publicly announcing a new focus on technology consulting. Investors praised the transition. Local newspapers celebrated his leadership. Awards followed. Charity donations increased. His public image became stronger every year. Behind closed doors, something entirely different was happening. The warehouses remained active. The trucks kept moving. The shipping records no longer matched the official business. At first, Evelyn believed accounting mistakes were responsible. Then she discovered employees being replaced by people nobody in the family recognized. When she confronted Ryan, he dismissed every concern. Months later, she secretly copied invoices and shipping schedules. The more she investigated, the more frightened she became. So, why not go to the police? I asked. I did. What happened? They believed Ryan. She smiled bitterly. He donates millions to community projects, sponsors scholarships, funds hospitals. Everyone sees the generous businessman. And you looked like a mother making accusations. Exactly. Silence settled between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been bothering me since dinner. Why involve me? She looked me straight in the eyes. Because you investigate digital deception for a living. You knew that before we met? I knew about you years ago. That answer caught me completely off guard. Ryan talked about you often after college. He did. He admired your technical skills. I almost laughed. So, he accidentally introduced you to the person who might expose him. He never imagined we'd actually meet. Everything suddenly fit together. The dinner invitation. The strange questions at the cafe. The notebook. None of it had been random. It had all been carefully arranged. Then Evelyn reached into her handbag and removed a folded photograph. It showed Ryan standing beside several shipping containers with 3 unfamiliar men. The picture had clearly been taken from a distance. When was this? 8 months ago. Why didn't you show me this sooner? Because it proves almost nothing. She slid another photograph across the table. The same location, different date, different trucks, the same men. Ryan appeared in every picture. Someone had been documenting him for months. You've been collecting evidence this whole time. Trying to... I frowned. What do you mean? She looked toward the library entrance before lowering her voice. Because Ryan already knows someone inside the family has been watching him. My expression hardened. He knows. Yes. And he doesn't know it's you? She didn't answer. That silence told me everything. He knows it's you. She slowly nodded. Then why are you still alive? Because he doesn't know how much I already have. A cold feeling spread through my chest. The notebook, the warehouse, the chase. It suddenly made sense. Ryan hadn't been trying to recover important evidence. He had been trying to find out who else had seen it. Then Evelyn delivered the one sentence that changed everything again. The notebook you have, she paused, contains mostly false information. I stared at her. What? Ryan replaced the original pages. My mind raced. He turned it in debate. Yes. He wanted to see who would investigate it. Exactly. Every address I had seen, every company name, every handwritten note. Most of it had been planted. Ryan wasn't protecting evidence. He was setting a trap, and by driving to that warehouse, I had already walked straight into it. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. I kept replaying everything in my head. Ryan had anticipated that someone would eventually get hold of the notebook. Instead of protecting the real evidence, he had replaced it with carefully crafted misinformation. Anyone who followed those clues would expose themselves before uncovering anything useful, including me. I rubbed my forehead. So we're back to having nothing? Evelyn slowly shook her head. Not nothing. She looked toward the library window, as if searching through old memories. There may still be one place Ryan never thought about. What place? The original warehouse. I was just there. Not that part. She leaned closer. When my husband owned the business, he refused to rely entirely on digital security. I frowned. What do you mean? He never trusted cloud storage. That immediately caught my attention. He installed an independent analog surveillance system years before Ryan took over. Cassette tapes. She smiled faintly. Hard drives. Completely offline. I stared at her. If they're still there, they would contain everything the cameras recorded. And Ryan never removed them? He upgraded every visible security system after taking control. She paused, but the old recording room was hidden behind the maintenance workshop. You never told him about it? My husband designed it himself. For the first time that day, I felt something that resembled hope. The next morning, before sunrise, we drove back to the industrial district. Instead of entering through the main gate, Evelyn led me behind the warehouse toward an overgrown service road. Most of the surrounding buildings were still empty. Only a few maintenance workers had arrived. She unlocked a rusted side door using an old key she had carried for years. I wasn't sure this would still work. The lock clicked. The door slowly opened. Dust covered everything inside. Broken shelves leaned against cracked concrete walls. Old electrical panels lined one side of the hallway. Nothing suggested that valuable evidence could still exist there. We followed a narrow corridor until Evelyn stopped beside what looked like an ordinary storage cabinet. She pushed it sideways. Behind it was another metal door. I looked at her in disbelief. You've got to be kidding. My husband liked hidden rooms. The hinges groaned loudly as we forced the door open. Cold air drifted out. The room beyond was barely larger than a walk-in closet. Metal racks held aging computer equipment covered in years of dust. Most of it looked abandoned. In one corner sat several surveillance recorders connected to thick cables running into the walls. I pressed the power button on the first unit. Nothing. The second. Nothing. The third machine hummed quietly. A small green light appeared. It still works, I whispered. I connected one of the storage drives to my laptop. For several tense moments, the screen remained blank. Then folders appeared. Hundreds of dated recordings. Month after month. Year after year. My heart started racing. Ryan had modernized every visible security system in the building. He had never realized the original cameras continued recording independently in the hidden room. We began opening files. The footage wasn't high quality, but it was clear enough. Truck after truck entered the warehouse. Containers were unloaded. Paperwork changed hands. Ryan appeared repeatedly, sometimes directing shipments, sometimes inspecting cargo, sometimes meeting with men I had never seen before. Every video included automatic timestamps. None of them had been edited. This wasn't circumstantial evidence. It was a complete visual history of the operation. For nearly 3 hours, we copied everything onto encrypted drives. Then I stopped. One particular recording caught my attention. It showed Ryan personally replacing shipping labels on several wooden crates. A forklift operator accidentally damaged one crate while loading it. The broken corner exposed stacks of tightly wrapped packages that clearly didn't match the declared contents listed on the shipping paperwork. Ryan immediately ordered everyone to stop working. He supervised the repackaging himself. That single recording connected the false shipping documents to the actual cargo. It was the strongest piece of evidence we had seen. We can't keep this to ourselves, I said. Evelyn nodded. I know. But if we go directly to the authorities, Ryan's lawyers may hear about it before investigators arrive. She looked at me. What do you suggest? I thought for several seconds. There needs to be a public record. That afternoon, I contacted someone I trusted, Marcus Reed. We had met 3 years earlier during a corporate fraud investigation. Marcus wasn't a police officer. He was an investigative journalist known for verifying evidence before publishing anything. More importantly, he protected his sources. We met inside the newsroom after business hours. Marcus watched nearly 40 minutes of footage without interrupting. When the last video ended, he removed his glasses and looked at me. If these files are authentic, they are. This is far bigger than financial fraud. I know. Marcus immediately arranged for independent forensic analysts to verify that the recordings had not been altered. The process took less than 24 hours. The conclusion was clear. The timestamps were consistent. The files showed no signs of digital manipulation. The storage drives had remained offline for years. Their authenticity was difficult to challenge. Only after receiving that verification did Marcus contact a federal task force specializing in organized commercial crime. This time, nobody could quietly dismiss the evidence. Investigators now had verified video recordings, shipment histories, warehouse documentation, and independent authentication from digital forensic experts. Ryan's carefully constructed public image finally had something stronger standing against it. Facts. By the following evening, search warrants had already been approved. At dawn the next morning, multiple enforcement teams moved toward every warehouse connected to Keller Dynamics. Watching the live news coverage from my apartment, I realized there was no turning back. Ryan had spent years controlling every digital trail. In the end, the evidence that threatened him most had been quietly waiting inside a forgotten room he never bothered to search. The news spread across Chicago before lunchtime. Every major station interrupted its regular programming to report coordinated raids on multiple warehouses connected to Keller Dynamics. Helicopter footage showed federal agents entering buildings, securing loading docks, and escorting employees outside for questioning. Reporters repeated the same question over and over. How had one of the city's most respected entrepreneurs become the center of a massive criminal investigation? I already knew the answer. Because his reputation had protected him longer than the truth had. Marcus called me just after noon. They got him. I stood by my apartment window. Where? About 20 miles outside the city. I frowned. I thought he'd stay and fight. He tried to leave. According to investigators, Ryan had packed only a small suitcase before leaving his downtown office shortly after dawn. Instead of heading toward a courthouse or meeting with his attorneys, he drove toward the interstate. His destination wasn't officially released. He never made it. State police intercepted his vehicle after receiving updated information from the federal task force. Without the warehouse recordings, they probably wouldn't have known where to look. Ryan was arrested without a chase. Ironically, the man who spent years planning every detail of his operation was stopped before he could even leave the state. The investigation moved quickly after that. Search warrants uncovered hidden financial records, shipping manifests, encrypted communication devices, false invoices, secret storage compartments inside multiple warehouses. Everything investigators discovered matched what the analog surveillance recordings had already shown. For years, Keller Dynamics had been used to disguise illegal shipments through legitimate commercial logistics. The company itself wasn't fake. Its public success was real. But behind that success, Ryan had quietly transformed parts of the business into a criminal enterprise. As more evidence became public, investors abandoned the company almost immediately. Board members resigned. Business partners canceled contracts. Several executives claimed they had never known what had been happening behind the scenes. Whether that was true became another investigation entirely. Within weeks, Keller Dynamics filed for bankruptcy protection. The business Ryan had spent years expanding collapsed faster than anyone thought possible. Watching everything unfold felt strangely unreal. Not satisfying, not joyful, Just quiet. One afternoon, nearly a month after Ryan's arrest, I met Evelyn one final time. This time we chose a small park instead of a cafe. Summer had finally arrived. Children played near the fountain while people walked their dogs beneath the trees. Life had moved forward for everyone else. For us, it still felt like we were closing the last chapter. She looked noticeably lighter than when we first met. Not happy, simply relieved. The legal process will take years, she said. I know. But at least the lies are over. I nodded. They are. She smiled. You know something? What? When you made that ridiculous joke at dinner, I laughed before she finished. Please don't remind me. I almost didn't answer. You mean you almost didn't say, want to go out with me? She laughed softly. I wanted to see how you'd react. And I nearly had a heart attack. For the first time since all of this began, we laughed without tension, without hidden motives, without fear. People often ask me if we ever dated. The answer is no. We never crossed that line. What started as an awkward joke remained exactly that. A joke. What we built, instead, was mutual respect. She thanked me more times than I could count. I reminded her that without her courage, none of the evidence would have survived. Neither of us could have exposed Ryan alone. Months later, Evelyn sold the remaining legal assets that belonged to her share of the family business. Instead of keeping the money, she established a scholarship fund honoring her late husband, supporting students studying engineering and industrial technology. She wanted at least one part of the family's legacy to help people instead of hurting them. As for Ryan, his prison sentence made headlines. But strangely, I don't think prison was the punishment that affected him most. Ryan had spent years carefully constructing the image of a visionary entrepreneur. He wanted admiration, recognition, respect. In the end, those were the first things he lost. Every award became meaningless. Every interview was replayed with new questions. Every success people once celebrated became a reminder of the deception hiding behind it. His greatest punishment wasn't simply losing his freedom. It was watching the reputation he valued above everything else disappear forever. Looking back now, I still find it hard to believe how everything started. Not with a police investigation. Not with a secret informant. Not with a mysterious phone call. It started because I made one stupid joke during dinner. A joke that should have been forgotten before dessert was served. Instead, it opened a door that revealed years of hidden crimes, betrayal inside a family, and a truth that almost stayed buried forever. Sometimes danger doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly across the dinner table, smiling as though everything is perfectly normal. And sometimes the smallest, most embarrassing moment of your life becomes the reason the truth finally comes to light. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. If you enjoyed this story filled with unexpected twists, suspense, and mystery, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next original story. I'll see you in the next one.